evening. Welcome to this evening's TI Technology webinar hosted by Texas Instruments. Thank you for joining us tonight, where we will look at ways to connect technology, mathematics, and financial literacy. I see that many of you are joining us for the first time, so we'd like to offer a special welcome if this is your first T3 Professional Development webinar. We'd also like to thank everyone for completing the live survey on the right side of your screen. If this is not your first webinar, you notice the voice is a little different tonight. My name is Stacy Thibodeau, and I am going to be your moderator tonight. I have taught science for over 20 years. I've taught all from Biology 1, Chemistry 1, Chemistry 2 dual enrollment with LSU. I've also taught Project Lead the Way courses in the Biomedical Sciences program. I love to use TI technology to assist me daily in teaching, data collection, and modeling mathematics concepts, linking them to science content. So the reason why I'm the moderator tonight is because we have a special guest panelist, Mr. Mike Houston, and Miss Lindsay Gold. Mike is in his 15th year of teaching high school mathematics in Elwood City, Pennsylvania. While participating in a TI Navigator Fast Track in 2007, he learned how technology can effectively cultivate students' wide range of learning styles. During this time, Mike has served as a T3 national instructor and a contributing author for Math Forward. Thanks for being with us tonight, Mike.
Stacy, I'm excited to be here.
Dr. Lindsay Gold is an assistant professor of STEM mathematics in the Teacher Education Department at the University of Dayton. Her research interests include pre-service teacher education, STEAM, financial literacy, early childhood mathematics, and professional development. She recently published a book titled On the Money, Math Activities to Build Financial Literacy K through 5. And Lindsay is a T3 regional instructor. Thanks for being here with us tonight, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Stacy. I'm happy to be here.
We are expecting a large crowd tonight, so your audio is muted. Feel free to send questions to all panelists using the Q&A window on the right side of your screen. We will also send general messages in the chat window. This session is being recorded. As a reminder, we will provide the link to this event's certificate of attendance at the conclusion of the webinar. Once the recording is available, if you'd like to follow along with your handheld or software, and we hope you will, we recommend doing this with the recording so you can download the activities and pause and rewind the recording as necessary. We don't expect you'll have any audio issues tonight, but in the event that you do, try selecting Communicate in the WebEx menu, Audio Broadcast, and then click Join. Right now we'll have Mike go over the agenda.
Thanks so much, Stacy. Stacy's already going through some of those welcome and introductions. After that, we're going to take a look at some state standards and some states that don't have standards. After that, we will take a look at interest using technology, as well as a really interesting and very applicable credit card conundrum problem using technology. And lastly, we'll wrap things up tonight by looking at some resources that you can use in your classroom. And be sure to stick around tonight, because for one lucky winner, Stacy will be drawing a T-Cube Summer Workshop registration.
Thanks, Mike. Lindsay, can you go over the expected outcomes for us, please?
Absolutely. So we are expecting you to discover a recursive formula for simple interest using NextNow, create graphs to model interest, create and use a spreadsheet as an algebraic tool for decision making, and use financial literacy skills and concepts to answer questions.
Thanks, Lindsay. All right, Mike, I'm turning it over to you. Go ahead, share your screen, please.
Thanks so much, Stacy. And I think Lindsay is going to start us off tonight.
I am, Mike. I am going to tell you a little bit about how it all began. So how Mike and I met was I was working on my doctorate at Ohio University, and Mike was doing a summer workshop there that I was a participant in. And sometime during that week, there was a discussion regarding financial literacy. And I was an elementary person, and it was the high school and middle school teachers that were talking about it. And so they asked me, well, what do you do at elementary for financial literacy? And I sat there for a moment and I thought, that is a great question. So I started doing some research on it, and that's how kind of my dissertation developed. But in the meantime, we came across these on-the-money financial literacy books. And there was one for middle school and there was one for high school. And so I asked the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics that published the book, hey, when's the elementary one coming out? And that's when they said, well, actually, we don't have anyone to write it. So me being overly ambitious, talked to Mike and said, hey, let's write a book. And we worked with Jennifer Bay Williams and Johnny Ashurst, and together then we created this On the Money series, Math Activities to Build Financial Literacy in Kindergarten through grade 5. But what's
as a natural high school teacher, Lindsay, I learned a lot about teaching elementary students. Sorry to interrupt, Lindsay.
No, that's perfect, and that's true. We have learned a lot from each other, which is great as we continue to do these presentations together. So it's nice that we see the whole spectrum of grade levels. But I want to talk a little bit about the Survey of the States, if you're not familiar with that. Every 2 years, the Council for Economic Education conducts this comprehensive survey of all 50 states as well as the District of Columbia regarding the economic and financial education in the United States. So what I would like you to do is to use the chat window to respond to the following. Does your state or province or location, depending on where you are, require high school students to take a course in personal finance? So if you'd please list your state and whether they require a course in personal finance.
And Lindsay, while people are taking some time to do this, a couple things. First of all, since I'm presenting full screen, I'm not able to see the chat window, so I'm going to ask you to take a look. And then the second thing is, I want to let everyone know, full disclosure, I didn't know if my own state had any requirements for high school students to take courses in financial literacy or personal finance.
And you are definitely not alone in that, Mike, because it's something that's really starting to take hold and new. And you can, those of you that can see the chat and look through, we have lots of different answers. But according to the surveys of the states, 21 states now require high school students to take a course in personal finance, which is actually up 4 states from the last survey in 2018. And 1 state did drop its requirement. So my next question to you in the chat, respond, does your state require high school students to take a course in economics? So let me know, what do you think? Economics, state, and answer. I'm seeing lots of yeses, nos, even some I'm not sure, which once again, that's okay. That is not untypical. So yeah, lots of great answers there. Yes, no. According to the survey of states, 25 states require high school students to take a course in economics, which is an increase in 3 states since 2018, which, me being a financial literacy advocate, I'm excited about that. So another question, if you have state standards, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being extremely aware, how familiar are you with those state standards for personal finance? Let's see how familiar we are. 5 being I'm really familiar, and 1 or 0, I like that too. 0, not at all. That's fine too. Oh, I love to see some people are actually teaching this next year. That is awesome. And then I'm even seeing some different departments are taking over social studies. I saw those kinds of things. That's great. Well, according to the survey of the states, 5 states plus the District of Columbia still do not include personal finance in their standards. However, there are multiple national standards that include personal finance, including the Jumpstart Coalition National Standards in K-12 Personal Finance Education, which is the one that I'm most familiar with. And then there's also the Council for Economic Education, National Standards for Financial Literacy as well. So both of those are national standards, but I know a lot of the states have adopted their own standards. So what is financial literacy here? According to Jumpstart Coalition, they define financial literacy as the ability to use knowledge and skills to manage one's financial resources effectively for a lifetime of financial security. So that's a pretty big responsibility here. And the activities for tonight were adapted from the NCTM On the Money series, which you can see the book covers there. But the point of these activities is to incorporate the financial literacy into what you're already doing in the mathematics classroom, or some of you the social studies classroom, without adding more to your plate. Because that's the thing. We don't want to add more, but we want to show you how you can integrate this seamlessly into what you're already doing. When we spoke with NCTM and told them we were doing this webinar, they are offering a discount for the participants of this webinar tonight. So if you're interested in exploring these or other financial literacy activities, feel free to visit the online NCTM store and enter this discount code, and then they're extending that through May 13th. So that's just if you're interested and want to see what else is out there, that's available for you. All right, Mike, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks so much. So with all the possible financial literacy concepts that we could start with tonight, it was really hard to pick just one. We decided to start with interest, and whenever we thought about it, we thought, why interest? Well, really because it spans so many different content areas in math. It has its own underlying mathematical properties and is definitely something that's often misunderstood by students. So we thought a good place to start would just be with simple interest. So I want to pull an example from my own personal life. Whenever I was born, I received $3,000 from family and friends. My parents put that money into a savings account so I could use it for a purchase years down the road. My parents made a bank deposit of $3,000 in a simple interest savings account, which had an annual interest rate of 2.5%. I believe some of those interest rates have changed lately, but that's what it was back then. I decided to withdraw that money on my 16th birthday to buy my first car. And the question is, how much money was I able to withdraw? So right now, I'm using the TI-84 emulator. It's called the TI-SmartView CE for the 84 Plus family. Tonight we're going to be switching back and forth between the 84 and the Nspire. As a reminder, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the software is currently free for 6 months for students and teachers available on our website. So we're going to start by working on the home screen. Lindsay, I know I just read that out pretty quickly. I know I told you the principal, I think, was $3,000, and the interest rate was 2.5%. So what's one way that we can figure out how much money we're going to have at the end of that first year?
So probably the first thing I would try to do is figure out how much interest I'm going to make in that year. So I would multiply my principal times my interest rate. And then once I figured out that, then I could add it back to my principal to see how much I'll have at the end of the year.
So principal times interest rate is 75. So it looks like we're getting $75 in interest per year. So at the end of the first year, looks like we're going to have $3,075. So then if we push this and think about the second year, we can start with that $3,075 now and add to that the original $3,000 principal and the 2.5% interest. So end of the second year. I'm really glad this webinar, I think, is, 4 hours tonight? This is going to take us a little while. So end of the third year.
Mike, is there a more efficient way than to type this out every time?
There is. So it looks like right now our current output or result is 3,225, and that's at the end of the third year. And we already figured out at the very beginning that we're giving $75 each year. So I could just hit the plus sign, which is automatically going to take my answer and add something to it. In this case, I want to add 75. So this is the end of my fourth year, fifth year, sixth, seventh, eighth, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So it looks like I'm going to have $4,200 at the end of my 16th year. And I saw some people chatting in, why don't we do this or that? And then I saw someone chat that this is a recursive way of looking at things. And I think that's really important for students to think about. Sometimes for your students, it may be the only way they're able to solve certain problems. So I think this is an important skill for them to know. I think having that answer plus is a pretty handy tool as well. And so one thing that we talked about in the description for this webinar is that we were going to look at next now. This is something that whenever I started teaching years ago, I'd never even heard of. It was new to me a few years ago. I learned it from some friends. And so we wanted to think about the next term in the sequence, so maybe the 17th year in this case. Lindsay, how would we think about using that next now words to describe what we're going to do?
So if I'm thinking of this conceptually and next and now, I probably would think of it as next equals now plus 75.
So the now is 4,200 plus 75. So at the end of my 17th year, we'd have 4,275. And so I think that's a great way of just kind of generalizing what's going on in this particular problem. To get the next term in the sequence, you're going to take the current now term and add $75. So again, this is one way to address this, and this is a recursive formula. It would certainly be a lot more efficient to have an explicit formula. So I think if we go all the way back at the very beginning, I think we had 3,000. I put 3,000 times that interest rate to get that amount at the end of the first year. So I always look at this as I see that 3,000 coming up more than once, and so that's my algebra skills and me think I can factor that out. So if I were to factor out the 3,000, that should be the same as multiplying by 1 plus the rate. And I think we did this a total of, I believe, 16 times for the 16 years. And so it looks like that is the same number as what we found recursively. So that means we just found an explicit formula for this particular situation. And so I think using the home screen to do this recursively is one great way, one great visual, certainly one way to address the problem. Another way is to make a list, and I want to do that using the stat key. So if you press the stat key and then press enter, it looks like I have some lists I can populate in L1, L2, et cetera. So maybe L1, I just want to put years. So I can certainly type 1, enter, 2, enter, all the way up to 16. But I think a little bit more of an efficient way that I like my students to be able to use is to think about writing a sequence for this. And so we can find that by pressing second and stat and go into the operations, OPS, and slide down to SEQ, which is number 5. And so if we're just doing the years, my expression is just x, and we're going to have the variable then be x, and we're going to go from 1 to 16. And if I press enter and press enter one more time, that gives me my 16 years in L1. And then this is really going to be helpful now whenever I go over to L2. If we go back and use that sequence generator, so second stat, slide over to operations, and then sequence. Now my expression, we're going to use that explicit formula, which was 3,000 times 1 plus my rate, and multiply by time. In this case, we'll use x to represent time, and time is going to vary between 1 and 16 years. And then paste that in, and so let's make sure the calculator's keeping us honest, at the end of that 16th year, we do have that $4,200 again. So this is, again, a second representation. Another way to look at this. Lindsay, can you think of any reasons why you might want to have your students learn this sequence tool?
Sure, Mike. So what I really like about this is that it can take some of that computation time out so that if I'm talking with my students, I can focus on more in-depth questioning. Here they have this visual that they can look at, and then I can also create what-if scenarios so that I could explore those financial literacy concepts.
What-if scenarios? Oh, you mean, so like right now I'm thinking, okay, what if the interest rate doubles? So if we go from 2.5% up to 5%, are we going to double the amount and all of a sudden have $8,400? So, you know what, I don't know. Let me go up to L3 and I'll highlight L3. That's important. Let's try this again. Second stat, operations, and I can just, it's kind of sweet, just toggle over and I can just delete the 2. And now, voila, I have 5%. Paste that in, and just by doing some scrolling, it's not looking like that's going to happen. So I think I just flew through it real quick, but definitely not double. And so I want to know why. I doubled the rate. Like, why isn't the amount doubled? So maybe you have a thought about that. Feel free to just use the chat window and maybe share your thoughts. So far, 2 different representations for this, especially once you have lists created using technology. A natural third way to represent this is with a graph. And so to graph possibly L1 and L2 in this case, if you hit second y equals, that will get us into the stat plot. And make sure your plot is on as opposed to off. Choose the scatter plot. My X list is represented by years, and my Y list is the amount of the 2.5%, and I really like magenta. So now if we press graph, there is our scatter plot, and as Stacy mentioned at the very beginning, I'm an algebra and calculus teacher, so I immediately see things like slope, rate of change, y-intercept. I would want my students to be able to write an equation to align the best fit for that. Lindsay, can you help me think about some of those things? Like whenever we go to write an equation, if I go to the y equals, I think about like y-intercept and I think about slope. So y-intercept, how would you help me with this, with the y-intercept?
So I'm thinking that's probably how much we started with.
That principal. So that was 3,000. And then we're adding to that, what was that, slope, which is the rate of change. And the rate, in this case, we're increasing, I think, by $75 every month.
Correct.
So let's check this out. That was pretty good. So I immediately would start asking my students to really, if I gave them the equation y equals 3,000 plus 75x, or y equals 75x plus 3,000, what's the slope? 75. Great. What does it represent? And ask them to really think about that. What is that 3,000? Like Lindsay said, it's the principal. What does that represent? And I think it really provides some serious context for them to look at some of these more abstract algebraic concepts. So next time you're introducing maybe some of these really typical Algebra 1 concepts, think about introducing some financial concepts as well. Like Lindsay said at the beginning, it's really hard to add to our plate. So instead of adding to our plate as math and science teachers, let's find ways that we can creatively introduce new topics while we're still teaching the current curriculum that we need to. And this problem in general, we were just talking about interest. So if we find a difference between the ending amount, that $4,200 versus the principal that we started with, that $3,000, there was a difference of $1,200. So that's all interest that we're making. And so, Lindsay, what's some advantages to students using technology to investigate this problem?
Well, one thing, once again, like the list, I'm such a visual person, and so I think it's really nice to be able to see this and to kind of actually see how my money is growing.
Absolutely. The other thing that I really kind of like about using technology in this case is, like you said, you could do the what-ifs. So you can either let students explore their own what-ifs, or you could ask some of your own what-ifs. But the bottom line, looks like whenever we are looking at simple interest savings accounts, we're only earning interest on the money that we deposited initially and nothing else. And it would be really nice if we could earn interest on not only the money that was deposited, but also the interest that accrued. So that's going to allow us to switch gears and start talking about compound interest. And as we switch gears, I'm going to change calculators. So we're going to be using the TI-Nspire for this part. Again, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this software is free for 6 months. I'm going to start a new document by hitting the home key. And we're going to look at the exact same situation as we initially talked about. So that same $3,000 principal and the 2.5%. And so that first year, we start with $3,000, and then we add to that $3,000 at that 2.5% to give us that $3,075. I remember that number. And then the second year, we were taking the $3,075, but one big difference is we're taking the $3,075, and now we're going to earn interest on that. So the end of the second year, that number I don't recognize. That looks different than what we saw with the simple interest. And so I think using that idea of recursion, I can either start typing the $33,151.88, or I can just type ANS, not AND, for answer, or I can find that answer right above the negative sign. So control negative, multiply that by 2.5%. So right now this is the end of our, third year, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So it looks like the end of our 16th year. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay, so wow, these numbers are looking kind of crazy with the decimals, but then your answers are nice and pretty. What's going on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So whenever we bring up the answer command, that is grabbing the entire answer as the calculator can hold it with all decimal places. I think this holds up to 14 decimal places. So even though it may look one way, it's really thinking another. And the other thing I did, because we're talking about money, is I went into the settings. So home and then settings, and took a look at the document settings, and I decided to fix our display at 2 as opposed to letting the decimal float, right? That's another option. So I did a fix 2 so that we were always talking about money in this case. So similar to what we did with the 84, this is one representation. Let's do another. Let's add a page by hitting Control Doc, and let's add a Listen Spreadsheets page. Whenever I do a Listen Spreadsheet, the first thing I do, this looks very Excel or Google Sheets-ish. I always go to the very top row where there's the letters, and I'm going to title this so I don't forget what they represent. And so that first one is our year. And I want to use that same sequence command, something similar that I did on the 84, because I really thought it was pretty slick. And so do that on the Nspire, hit the menu, and go to number 3, data, and then generate sequence. And so you'll notice that this is now asking for a function in terms of n, so some small differences between the 84 and the Nspire, but I really want my formula and function to just be x, and we're going to look at this from 1 up to 16, and that didn't work. So let's try this one more time. Oh, right, because I can't use x. I said I was using n. There we go. It's always nice whenever I make mistakes. Lets everyone know that it's real. So there's my 16 years, and then I'm going to title this other column amounts. And one thing I forgot to have you guys do, and Lindsay, I don't know if anyone's already thinking about this, but we really now need an explicit formula to help us out with this problem. So I'll give everyone just a few seconds here to think about what the explicit formula might be. And if you could just type that in the chat window, that would be great. So I know I didn't give everyone a lot of time, but Lindsay, do we have any thoughts on what that explicit formula might be?
Well, that's a good question. I'm looking here to see. I see 3,000 times the quantity 1 plus 0.25. And then I'm seeing, it looks like some exponents going on here, raising to the nth power.
Yeah. So Lindsay and I had a conversation earlier today about this exact problem. And if this was my initial time how I was introducing compound interest and exponential functions to students, this is probably not going to be my go-to because I would want them to actually generate some data first. So I'd want them to probably make a table of values first and maybe plot those and realize that this is probably going to look a little bit different than the last problem we just did. So we're going to raise this to the nth power and check this out for 16 years. And so let's make sure, again, numbers are matching. So $4,453.52. Yep, those match. And so we talked in the last 84 example that it allows us to do a what if. And I just love how easy and quick it is to do what ifs. So let's say I want some more money. And I want to know if maybe now with compound interest, maybe that's it. It's a compound interest thing. If we double the interest rate, we get double the amount. So let's go to menu, data, and generate sequence. And so we're looking at 3,000 plus 5%. And we're going to raise that to the nth power and take a look at this for 16 years. So let's see, are we double? Oh, man, not double here either. I wonder what's going on. And again, I would ask my students to make conjectures about why that's not double. Why can we double the interest rate again and we're not getting a double the amount back out later? Third way to represent this is the second way. Third way is by looking at a graph. And so again, once we have lists, we can create graphs pretty easily in the Nspire. Hit Control and let's add another page. And this time we're going to add a data and statistics page. So at the very bottom of the x-axis, you'll see a click to add variable. So my independent variable in this case is the year. And I think my dependent variable, let's first do the amount. Wow, Lindsay, that looks linear, at least kind of linear to me. What do you think?
That's what I was trying to decide, if it had a curve to it or not.
All right, so I think one good way to double check this is why don't we hit menu and then analyze, because I can choose number 4, plot function, and we can go back and plot that function from our simple interest and see let's compare them. So that was, I think we used 3,000 plus 75x. So that now doesn't look very linear, right? It looks almost as time is going on that my amount is getting further and further from something that's linear. So one thing I always like to do is check out some other possibilities. So if we go back to menu and go to plot properties, we can add a y variable. In this case, let's add the 5% and take a look at that. And so to me now, as the interest rate is increasing, in this case from 2.5 to 5, it really looks like I can really start to see that exponential part of that curve happening. So we've looked at this recursively, numerically, graphically. The last thing that I want to do before I turn things back over to Lindsay, both the 84 and the Nspire have a finance solver capability, and this wouldn't, again, be my first go-to, but once students start wrapping their head around interest in this case, I think it's okay to let them play with this solver and explore things. So let me bump back the 84 for a second, and the solver is available on any of the TI-83 through any of the current 84 models. It's under the apps. It's usually loaded on all of the calculators by default, but if it's not, you can get that, again, for free on our website. So I'm going to open the Finance app and choose the first choice TVM solver. And I've already pre-populated this. It's pretty easy to do. We're talking about n representing the number of years, in this case 16. And let me put in 2.5%. for the interest rate, the present value. This is something that I had to think about for a second. We're going to make it a negative 3,000, and we're doing that because the money is going into the bank. It's leaving our hands. So that's a negative 3,000. Skip over payments because we're not making any additional payments. And this is one thing I had to find in order to get the future value to calculate. We're going to solve, which is under the enter key, but it's in green. So I got to hit the alpha key first and then the enter key. And that does a really nice quick solve for me. And then I can do, again, the what if. What if we're talking about 5%? Again, is this double? And we already found out the answer to that. But I think it's nice because it works so quickly. It lets, again, students play. The P/Y and C/Y, payments per year, so how many payments per year are you making and how many times per year is it compounded. So just a little bit of extra info on that. Let's take a look at that on the Inspire. I'm going to add one more page, so Control Doc, add a calculator, and hit Menu. And choice 8 is Finance, and we'll do Finance Solver. And we said was 16, interest rate 2.5, present value nothing. I'm sorry, present value we said was negative 3,000, right? Payment 0, and we don't know the future value. It says press enter to calculate. So if I press enter again, it's really, really nice. It does it really quickly. So I don't know, Lindsay, any other thoughts so far?
No, I just really like that because when you're doing financial literacy, you're talking about authentic real life situations, and these students are going to start getting jobs or start having loans or payments and these kinds of things. So I think they would really benefit from playing around with this.
I agree. So before we move into this last activity, if you've been following along tonight with your handheld or your software, that's great. For the last activity, though, Lindsay preloaded information and formulas into an Inspire file, which, again, you're going to receive at the end of the webinar. So at this point, please just sit back, relax, and enjoy. Lastly, Lindsay and I had a long talk about what the best tool for the job was for this next activity that we're going to do. And we really decided that students are going to benefit most by using spreadsheets. So that's why we chose to use the Inspire. So, Lindsay,
right.
Take it away.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. If you'll flip to our scenario that we're going to be exploring. While Mike is doing that, I'm going to go ahead and start to read this scenario to you, especially to those that are listening to the webinar and don't have this in front of them so that you have the information. But you're beginning college. Your parents and you have decided that you will not get a part-time job. Your tuition, books, dorm room, and meals are covered, but you need $100 a month for other expenses. Because you will not have an income, you decide to get a credit card. Your parents agree to make the minimum monthly payment for the 9 months you are in college. When you come home next summer, you will work at your uncle's business to pay off the balance of your credit card. You will need to make 3 equal payments in June, July, and August so that you will pay off the entire balance, any interest added in the summer, and your parents. The annual interest rate on the credit card is 18% with a monthly rate of 1.5%. The minimum monthly payment required on the credit card is 5% of any unpaid balance. Hint, you wouldn't pay interest on the first month because it is not an unpaid balance. And that seems like a whole lot of words for students to decipher. So to help that, I've highlighted a couple of the important parts. But I want you in the chat to let me know, what do you think would be the essential question here? What would you want your students to look at?
As people are thinking about that, I want you all out there to know that Lindsay and I approach this problem in different ways. And that's why, again, we kind of ended looking at using a spreadsheet as a tool, because there was lots of different ways that we approached this, and we were all coming up with the same answer, and certain ways had certain advantages. So I just wanted to throw that in there, Lindsay.
Yeah. And I'm actually reading the chat as we're talking here, and you have so many good essential questions. And that's what another thing about this is really nice that you could talk to your students about, you know, what's important, what do we need to figure out here. But the essential question that I'd like to focus on tonight is how much would you need to pay in June, July, and August to pay off the credit card balance, any interest in your parents? So I need a strategy. This is a lot of information. I was trying to think, how am I going to make sense of this problem? So I think a spreadsheet here would be our best bet for right now. And what I like about a spreadsheet is that it incorporates these formulas and equations, which can be an overlooked way to teach algebra, especially right now as we're in this online environment. This could be an excellent tool for a student to display their work. And here we're exploring those financial concepts and thinking with, once again, not adding anything to the math content, which I think is really nice. Like Mike said, I populated some of this beforehand. So you'll see at the top, you have your titles, you have your forward balance, your months, your purchase, your new balance, your monthly interest, adjusted balance, and payment. And then for my own organizational purposes, I have in row 1 some information that helps me think about what I'm doing here. So I know that this is a new credit card and my forward balance is going to be 0. I highlighted that because in the future, when you're making new scenarios, maybe you have a credit card that you're transferring a balance from or something when you're doing this. So that might not always be 0. So that's something you could change. Your months are just listed from September to August because school starts in September in this scenario, and then we have to have it paid off by August. Our purchases, every month it told us we are going to make a purchase of $100. So I knew that that was important. Once again, that's something that could be changed. Maybe next time I do this scenario, it's going to be $200 or whatever. It's something you can change. Our new balance, once again, is 0 here because this is a new card. Now, the next thing I want you to look at is this monthly interest. In the scenario, it said that it's 1.5% monthly, but here on the calculator, it's displaying, it looks like 2%. And this goes back to what Mike was saying about that fixed 2. So the calculator is rounding it in this cell, but when doing the calculations, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see it's actually calculating with a 1.5%, which is really nice. But it is displaying that, so I wanted to point that out. Also, another thing that you could change in your future scenarios. Your adjusted balance is going to be 0 because we're starting with nothing. And then your payment, this is reminding me, hey, my parents said they're going to pay 5% every month. So going to row 2, I went ahead and A2 put equals A1, just in case I change that later and have my forward balance. It's September, it's our first month. We made a purchase here of $100. If you look in this cell, you'll see it says $C, $1. And the reason that I put those dollar signs in there is because that's fixed. I know that every time it's going to be $100. So I fixed both the row and the column. Mike, can you show us where to find the dollar sign on the handheld?
Yeah, if you're using obviously a computer, then you can just use a dollar sign from the keypad. But if you're using the actual handheld, you want to hit Control and then the catalog on the right-hand side, and there you'll find the dollar sign. Since we are using I'm using a computer tonight, this problem especially because the spreadsheet is pretty large, it makes more sense to change your document preview. I normally do almost everything in handheld. But since we need a little more screen space, and it also changes the font a little bit too, makes it a little bit cleaner, I'm using computer view.
Thank you. And then going across now, we have a new balance of $100, which then would be your equation A2 plus C2. Going further across, our monthly interest, we're not going to have any because that's based on the forward balance and we didn't have one. But that, once again, is fixed. So we have $E, $1 to fix it. It's at 1.5% and then times A2, which is our forward balance. Going on to our adjusted balance, that's going to be our new balance plus our monthly interest that we accrued, which is D2 plus E2. And finally, our payment is going to be 5% of my adjusted balance. which in this case is $5. Once again, fixed. $G, $1 to tell us that every time I'm going to owe 5% on that adjusted balance. Okay, so now we've made it through our first month of college and we're entering our second month here in October. Our forward balance here at the beginning is going to be our adjusted balance minus our payment. So here we have 100 minus 5 or F2 minus G2 to get our $95. Now, Mike, because this is a spreadsheet, it has a lot of cool things that we can do where we're not typing this in every time. So we know that our purchases are going to be $100 through May. So can you show us how to fill that in through May, please?
Yeah, for those that don't know, if you move your cursor to the bottom right corner of the cell, you'll get this big thick plus sign, and that I can just drag and drop down. And Lindsay, you said end of May?
Yes, please. And then also, I'd love if you would populate the rest of the cells here with this fill command so that we can kind of see what's going on.
Yeah, so the new balance all the way over to payment?
Yes, please. And then take that through May as well. And you're going to see some lines here. And the reason those lines are there is because we don't have all of our information. So Mike, if you'd go over to the column A forward balance, and if you could populate it through the beginning of June, I want to know where I am here at the beginning of June. And then it fills everything in. So what is this telling us? That's the important thing. It's cool, it's got lots of features, but we need to talk to our students. What is it that we're finding out here? So here we see that in the beginning of June, how much do I owe the credit card company? Mike, how much do I owe the credit card company at the beginning of June?
Looks like it's coming in at $742.41.
Awesome. Mike, how much do I owe my parents?
Ooh, I'm going to need a minute to add some stuff up. So I think we're going to be adding up these payments that my parents have been making in column G. So one way to do that is just go into a new column like column H, and I can type an equal sign, and then we're doing a sum, and then parentheses, and I can just click and drag and press enter. So it looks like I owe my parents a little bit over $200.
Okay, so this gives me some information. So now I know that I owe the credit card company $742 around. I owe my parents around $204. Together, how much debt am I in here at the beginning of June? So what would those be added together?
Looks like around $950 if we're among friends.
I agree. And here, Mike's putting in the equation for you. But the thing with money, too, is we can talk to the students, you know, kind of about, all right, so we're looking at $950. We're going to owe a little more interest here over the summer, but this kind of gives us an idea of what we're working with. So, Mike, I'm not going to make any purchases over the summer. So if you could just fill those in with zeros, that would be great.
Yep.
And then I would like you to go ahead and populate the rest of the cells, even though we're going to make some changes. So if you could just fill down on the rest of those cells, even though I'm going to play with them a little bit, as well as the forward balance, if you could just fill those two in, that'd be great. Excellent. Okay, so we know, going back to June, we know at the beginning we owe around $742, but then we have some interest that we have accrued here as well. So now we're looking at $753.54. Just looking at the credit card part, not my parents, just the credit card part, the problem said 3 equal payments. Now this activity was written for the middle school students, and so I was thinking, you know, thinking real life, it's more important to me to do an about. So if I'm going to make a payment on a credit card, I'm probably not going to divide by 3. I'm going to do about. So say I want to about pay a third, which is about $255. So can you make a payment of $255 for me, please? And when Mike does that, you'll see then now we're looking at a forward balance in July of around, $500. But once again, we're going to get some more interest in there. So Mike, at the end of July, can you pay $255 again on my credit card? And when Mike does that, you'll see $251.02, but once again, we have interest here. So Mike, what's my last payment on my credit card going to be? What should I pay to pay off this credit card?
Looks like that adjusted balance, right, the $254.79.
Exactly. So will you just put that in the payment part just so I feel better about myself and know that my credit card is paid off with $254.79? Thank you. And then my parents. I can't forget my parents. Now, the parents might say, oh, pay off your credit card first and then you can pay us. But we're going to assume that we needed to pay our parents the 3 months. So we could take our 200 and divide by 3 and then add that to our 255 to see, that essentially that we're about going to have to pay our parents around 300 or our parents plus our credit card around $325 each month. So what does that tell us? Thinking financial literacy wise and talking to your students, you're like, well, you got to pay $325 a month. You have to make sure you make that much money. And those were some of the essential questions that I saw about, will I make enough money? Will I have enough to keep going through the year? Those kinds of things. So this is all really important stuff to talk to your students about. But another thing that I wanted to talk about was, is it worth it? So value, worth. If I had to pay $950, which is about $50 more than what I was actually charged, because I charged $900 on my credit card, was it worth it? Mike, was it worth it?
I can just speak from my own experience. I spent a lot more, and yes, I would be totally happy with spreading out those payments and only having to deal with $50 personally.
I agree. When I think college-wise, $50, that's worth it. But what's cool about this is you can change the scenario. What if it was a cell phone, Mike, and halfway through, you dropped your cell phone in the ocean? Was it worth it? So these are things you can talk to your students about. You can change the scenario, you can change the cells, but I want you to make sure that you're stressing to your students that if you're only paying the minimum payment, you could end up paying so much more than the original cost. So one of my big push right now is doing financial literacy all the way down at the elementary level, because I want them to start to recognize these things. So if this is a middle school activity, you're not only teaching them how credit cards work and how interests work, but that it's not always advantageous to pay only the minimum balance and how it can cause you to get in some serious debt. So this is where they're really starting to learn those financial literacy skills. But once again, have fun with it. Your students would enjoy manipulating the numbers, changing these kinds of things, like changing the purchases to $200. You can see what that does to your forward balance. It makes it a lot larger than we were talking about before. So once again, you can go into the is it worth it? So it's so much more than just the calculations.
I agree with you. Thanks so much. So one of the things that I was thinking about as we were doing this, a little while ago, I had mentioned that we were thinking about the best tool for the job. And so, you could use Excel, you could use Google Sheets. There's certainly advantages, Google Sheets being free, et cetera. But now I'm thinking more math-like and more mathy. And now that I have all these columns labeled, forward balance, purchases, et cetera, these are now things that are represented in the calculator as a list. I can then graph lists and see how things are represented and visually how they interact. So I think there's still more power here than what we explored tonight. I feel like I owe Lindsay a huge amount of gratitude for putting this together. I really appreciate just how elegant this file is. I know it probably took a lot of time for her to put together. So, Lindsay, thanks so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love talking financial literacy and mathematics, so it's a passion of mine. I enjoy it.
So we really hope that you enjoyed tonight. I'm going to be turning things back over to Stacy here in a minute. But before I do, just a shameless plug here. When you leave the webinar tonight, a brief survey will automatically appear in your browser. And your feedback really guides us as we plan all these future online events. So for example, if you really liked what you saw tonight and it's something that you want more of, be sure to let us know. If there's other things that you really feel like you could benefit from, let us know. That being said, Stacy, you have control.
Thanks, Mike. Great job, guys. I know personally I learned a lot. I have a high school student. She's in a business and finance academy in our local district. And I told her about this webinar, and she was like, I wonder if they're going to talk about this, and talked about refinancing houses. And so having that conversation with students, even as early as late elementary to middle school, is definitely exciting for us as parents, because then we can tell them maybe some of our shortcomings and where we went wrong. We are nearing the end of tonight's webinar, so if you do have any questions or comments, please make sure you put it into the chat window. We are having a drawing, just like Mike had mentioned earlier when we were going over the agenda. And tonight's lucky winner is Nydia Garcia. Congratulations, Nydia. You'll be contacted by a member of the PE team from Texas Instruments in a couple of days, and they will explain to you about the summer workshops. In the chat window right now, you will have a link to the documents from tonight, as well as a certificate of attendance. If you need it for COUs for your district, or you just want to have it. You'll also get the same links in the follow-up email that will have the link to the recording. We do hope that you continue having conversations outside of tonight. Stay connected with Texas Instruments. We have a huge presence over social media between Facebook, Twitter. I know I tweeted about tonight's webinar, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest. Twitter is a great way to have a professional learning community, as well as to continue conversations that happen during the nights. If for some reason you need any more information, or you want to contact someone to get some help with technology, TI Cares is going to be your best suit. 1-800-TI-CARES or ti-cares@ti.com for an email. They are extremely friendly, extremely helpful, knowledgeable. They listen to what teachers have to say. That's their job, is to help us have a better experience with the technology to make sure that we get it done with our students correctly. Mike had mentioned about the survey, so please be honest. Tell us some information that you would like to see on upcoming webinars, and definitely give some feedback to how tonight went, and then, like I said, maybe others that you would want to hear later. So thank you again, Mike and Lindsay, for tonight. Thank you guys all for joining us tonight and sharing your Cinco de Mayo with us. Like I said, I know for me, with a high school student, it helped with financial literacy. And from reading information in the chat, a lot of different people had conversations as well.
Lindsay, Stacy, thanks so much.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And so if you guys are joining us for the professional development series, there will be one again next Wednesday night. Thank you and have a good night.